Hi, and welcome to Season 7, Episode 2 of My Words, Our Journey, the podcast. The journey, the lodging place. To recap Episode 1, Stephen is taken to the lodging place and told of its purpose, as well as why they think his family would be a good fit. Now, we'll join them for Chapter 4. Chapter 4. The Tours. The Stevens family spent the next several hours together. They checked out common areas, beautiful gardens, hospital, the veterinarian clinic, and amazing stables. The group also was invited to the shopping mall, stopped in briefly in several eateries, and spent a few minutes in an amazement at the vast fields of plants and numerous vegetables and fruit trees. It was also mentioned there was a large herb garden located on the far side of the fields, which contained many plants from other planets for the chef to use in preparing meals. When the assembly finished walking through the church, Mr. Whitmore surprised Trent when he said, "Okay, now that you've got a taste of what we have to offer, let's split up the groups, just for a little while. Stacy, we'd like you and the children to visit the Learning Center and its many amenities. Trent, we'd like to show you where you'd be working. Then, if everyone's up to it, we'll introduce the family to some of our staff members and have lunch." Before he had finished his last word, the young woman and two children appeared at the door, wide smiles and welcoming postures. Obviously, tour guides for Stacy and the children, who seemed more than enthusiastic to go along. Trent looked at Stacy, wanting to get an idea of what she was thinking, when she reached for his hand, squeezed it tight, smiled, and said, "Enjoy. We'll see you soon. If the school is anything like the rest of this place, I can't wait to see it." Trent thought she meant what she had just said. It made him feel a little better, and knew he would enjoy the rest of the designated tour, knowing she was okay. When the family had left the room, Mr. Whitmore asked, "Are you ready to be blown away, Trent?" Trent just smiled and followed the older gentleman as he led the remainder of the group out the door and in the direction of their next stop. He was not sure how the family had traveled to the school, but he and his posse had only walked a few steps when they entered a small cinder block building where one of the men entered a code on a panel. There was a large orange X in the middle of the room. Each man stood as close to the X as possible. Within seconds, Trent understood why. The walls and floor began to move around him like something out of a sci-fi movie. For a moment, Trent thought the whole thing was going to lift off the ground and shoot into air. Instead, everything became still, one wall being replaced with a wide entrance that contained a well-lit, moving floor. The movement was neither fast nor slow, but steady, giving Trent time to see each photograph, painting, and sculpture that was decoratively placed along each side of the wall. Most were places, buildings, figures Trent couldn't possibly have recognized. This was clearly a path that was meant to put the lodging place's wide variety of guests at ease. "If I have a chance, I really want to do this again," he thought, looking at each painting of what he could only guess was a king and queen from another world. As her husband scanned the wall of welcome, Stacy and the children were overwhelmed with what they had been described as the place of higher learning. It was clear to her that their tour was meant to impress, but also keep them out of the areas where they may encounter others. She understood. If there really were guests from another planet here, it wasn't time for her or the children to be exposed to them. Still, with each corner that they turned or door that was opened, she found herself holding her breath briefly. The school was spotless. Everything they saw looked new, high-tech, and expensive. The kids could barely contain themselves from what they were seeing. From the white sparkling floor with magnificent gold flakes to the brightly colored walls, decorated designs, colors that she couldn't really describe in a word, other than spectacular. Many of the colors she swore she had never seen before. As the children laughed and talked with their new friends, Stacy felt a sudden dread come over her. Would she and Trent be able to make the right decision about their family's future? Her host, Amy, must have sensed her sudden mood change and spoke softly. "Stacy, you and the children seem level-headed. Just take it in. See what today brings. Don't worry about what happens after. It wasn't that long ago that I was in your shoes. I know it's hard, but there's so much more you'll encounter before your family must make their decision." With that, she surprised them all with a question. "Everyone, would you like to take a break and take in a show?" After all, the children yelled yes, and looked at her watch and quickly turned the group down a long corridor away from the school's main hallway. Moments later, you could hear the sounds of the bell, letting students know it was time to change classes. Stacy knew Anne had moved them out of the way, per orders, but that was okay with her at this point. Besides, she was excited as the children to see more of what the complex had to offer. Passing 3 large doors that looked like they could hold an elephant, Anne said in passing, "This is where many of our inner space games are played." Inner space games, Stacy thought. Could I really be part of something like this? Chapter 5. Worlds and Planets. The trip had taken nearly 10 minutes, but Trent was somewhat sad when it was over. He could not see a day when taking the magnificent ride he had just taken would get old. I really want more time with that artwork, he thought, as they stepped off the moving floor that seemed to disappear only a few feet in front of them. There are 8 security stations located in the property, Mr. Stevens, 4 more within the lodging place, and 2 suspended above. There are 172 employees, 9 supervisors, and myself that make up the force, spoke the third gentleman in the party for the first time. Trent wished he could remember his name, so he could address him properly, but spoke anyways. "So you're in charge of security for the whole facility?" The man smiled and spoke. "Yes, Mr. Trent. They all answer to me, and I answer to the general manager. I've been here for nearly 16 years. Trent guessed the guy couldn't be past his mid-30s. To whoever would answer, Trent asked a question he wasn't sure he was ready for the answer. "How many are on staff here altogether?" He was not sure why or who answered the question because he noticed a group of young people heading their way, but he did hear the answer nonetheless. 655 currently on staff. The group was obviously coming to meet them, and as they approached, Trent noticed that each wore a purple-colored sash over their shoulder. They were teenagers, mixed boys and girls, each properly groomed, dressed nicely, but still in current teenage attire. Mr. Whitmore surprised Trent again when he spoke. "Trent, we thought it might be a good idea for you to spend some time, a little time, with our welcoming counselors." He made a hand motion across the group. "This fine group is a sample of young people that greet our arrivals, that have young children of their own. They would like to show you their work area, and I've asked them to tell a little bit about themselves and their experience here." He put a hand on Trent's shoulder. "I'm aware your decision must be what you feel is best for your family. I think you'll see your children will gain a lot from being in a place like this." And with that, he and his associates were gone. For just over an hour and a half, Tyler and Amber enjoyed a movie inside the largest movie theater they had ever seen. It was not only the size of the room, but also the advanced technology that blew them away. It was as if they were inside the movie, from the sound that seemed to come from every direction, to the whole room apparently being a screen, making you feel like in every direction you were in the middle of the action. It was way past 3D. They were introduced to planets and worlds that they had never heard of in their short lives. Amber enjoyed every moment, but especially the creatures and plant life that were explained. Tyler, of course, he loved the idea of faraway galaxies, that if he was hearing right, supported life that everyday people knew nothing about. Well, it was all too much for their parents to take in. For the children, they had no problem believing. As they exited the theater and headed to meet their father for lunch, and the next step in their adventure, both children had the same thought at the same time. "I hope we get to come back here." Chapter 6. Amber's Loss. The dining hall was simple compared to everything else the group had experienced so far. While it was sparkling clean, large, and seemed to have the necessities needed to feed and seat an enormous number of people, it just didn't have the same wow factor for Tyler. It reminded him of a restaurant section at any mall. Large mall, but a mall. He figured there were probably 300 kids, adults in the room. He thought it wasn't even half full. Their group had been steered toward a section of the room where they could choose from 5 different counters to order from. Each had their own specialty. He, however, hoped he'd have a chance at some point to check out all the other counters. His mind could not begin to guess what they would have to offer. While he watched his mother and father small talk with a handful of workers they had been introduced to, when they arrived, he wondered, what were they thinking about this place? Would his family become part of all this? He had gone with a grilled cheese sandwich and a bowl of chicken noodle soup. It was easily the best he'd ever had. So far, he saw nothing that would keep him from wanting to live here forever. Maybe he could get a job at the theater when he was a little older, he thought. Well, he made up his mind. He felt his parents may have other ideas. Amber, he felt, was on board with him. He knew his sister well, and since she had the same enthusiasm for the world they learned about, he had not seen her so relaxed in a long time. This would be good for her, he thought. His sister had lost her two best friends in the past few months, and while he was far from the perfect brother, he felt sorry for her. Only a short time ago, Amber, Tammy, and Tiffany had been best of friends. They did everything together. When Amber and Tiffany found out that Tammy's family was moving several hours away, the girls were crushed. But at least they still had each other. When Tiffany was killed in a car accident while riding with her older cousin only a few weeks later, Amber fell apart and retreated into her own world. He had overheard his parents talking and agreed that she was trying to avoid being hurt again. By avoiding relationships, she wouldn't have to feel the pain. She didn't notice as he watched her eat meatloaf and study the theater guide they had been given earlier. She was too interested in something for the first time in a long time, and her brother was glad. There was a stir across the room that caused everyone at the table to look in that direction. A group of about 12 had entered from the farthest door, and those that had seen them first stood and began to whistle and clap. As if a wave crossed the room, others began to join in with the applause. As those around them stood, one of the young people adjacent table leaned across and spoke. "That's our retiring general manager with some of his staff." Trent heard those words and thought to himself, "Going to be hard to fill those shoes." Chapter 7. The Decision. When the group was escorted out of the dining hall, a warm breeze blew over them. Tyler looked to the sky, sensing there was something above them generating the warmth. He still wasn't convinced it wasn't there, even when his eyes and his ears told him otherwise. Mr. Whitmore led the family and their group to a covered area that seemed like a perfect place to build a fire and take in the wonderful surroundings. That wasn't what he had in mind, however. After he gathered everyone close in around him, he thanked those that had helped them with the tours and lunch, and then released them back to their duties. That included the two men that had been by his side the entire time. Once everyone was gone, he spoke to the family. "I know this has been a lot to absorb today, but I don't have the luxury of time to wait and draw out decisions that must be made. I will tell you, I am prepared to offer your family the chance of a lifetime. And, while I promise you it won't be easy, I can equally promise your family will experience things that others can't even begin to dream of. Waiting for you at the end of the path, across the way, is a resting area, already set up for your family to relax and discuss your thoughts, concerns, and any questions you may have for me. I'll answer them to the best of my ability. I only ask that you watch the video waiting for you, discuss, and do not return until you have a decision for me. There is a phone that, once picked up, will connect directly to my office. Please call with questions or when you're prepared to return. I'll meet you here. Please take all the time you need." Tyler was the first to make a move towards the rock walk. The path was simply that. Everyone was silent as they followed him up the trail that gently twisted and turned towards their destination. The walk lasted almost 15 minutes, most of it uphill, but when the tired group completed the trip, they were rewarded with the most spectacular view of the mountains, its landscape, and of course, the lodge below. Tyler again felt the warm breeze engulf him as he surveyed the assortment of drinks, snacks that were neatly arranged for them. Again he looked up to the heavens and saw nothing that could cause the warmth. Once everyone had a few minutes to gather themselves and find a comfortable seat, Amber hit play on the remote. The video ended about 30 minutes later. No one said a word, each lost in their own thoughts. Amber was ready to jump in with both feet. If the powers that be could box up her belongings and bring them here, she'd have no need to return to the outside world. That thought would have made her sad, if not for the excitement she felt about her possible future. Stacy was not as sure about things as her daughter, and while she had many things to be excited about, the practical side of her, being a mom, would not let her enjoy them fully. There was so much to consider. The pressure of knowing there were so many people waiting on their decision was overwhelming. She was not thinking about herself, but of their home, the children, how her husband would handle the stress of such an enormous challenge. While she was confident in his abilities, there was worry for the family unit and how they would be able to handle the adjustments and the pressure, the struggles that they would have to endure. Were they strong enough? Tyler only had one thought. When can I see my room? Trent had enough thoughts rolling around in his hurting head for himself, Tyler, and probably a small country. Trent thought he knew what his family was going to say. It's your decision. We'll support whatever you decide. We're behind you all the way, Dad. Still, he was not ready to ask. The miraculous surroundings, the silence that engulfed them, was peaceful during what he considered to be the most important part of his family's history. It was Amber that finally broke the silence. After a while, I think we're meant to do this. That opened up the floodgates of conversation. As the Stevens family worked through their decision, Mr. Whitmore sat at his desk, thinking about what he'd been asked to do. He knew someday the truth of why this family had been chosen for a challenge like this would possibly come to light. He had done all he could, the powers that he had, to bury it deep. But he also had been around long enough to know the truth always has a way of finding its way to the surface. Trent would never consider the move if he knew the truth, Mr. Whitmore thought. Chapter 8. Things Getting Done. Trent was not unlike most fathers. If his family was happy, he was happy. And in the end, that was the fact that led him to agree with their decision. While he was the one that would have the pressure and the weight of the new position and expectations, it was them that would reap the benefits of their new lives, and he was okay with that. When Mr. Whitmore had heard the family's answer, Trent could hear the relief in his new boss's tone. It never occurred to him to question the urgency or pressure that the old man appeared to be under regarding filling the position. He would later blame it on the whirlwind that his family had been caught up in. As they headed back down the path, the children could not stop talking about all the new things to enjoy, the school they actually seemed to be looking forward to, and of course the expectation of meeting the guests. Stacy took his hand and smiled as they walked. Trent looked into her eyes, and he could see the excitement there as well. She had really been sold on the opportunities for the children, as well as the thought of not having to worry about the daily stresses of running a household on the outside world. The video had explained their salaries, the paying off of all their debt, and the no-cost living they would enjoy while being at the lodging place. Trent knew this would mean so much to his loving wife. They had worked hard and struggled just to keep the electricity on and food on the table. He wanted to take that stress and worry off his family. Again, the thought should have crossed his mind. If it's too good to be true, maybe it is. But the thought didn't. Upon arriving back to the covered area, the family was greeted by a small group of men, women, and children, along with Mr. Whitmore. There was clapping, smiles all around as they were welcomed to the family. Trent shook hands, heard names he wouldn't possibly remember, and watched as his wife and children seemed truly happy. A young gentleman moved in next to him and spoke softly. "Mr. Stevens, my name is Marcus Worley, and I will help you with everything you need to take care of to make the transition as smooth as possible." From a folder he carried at his side, he removed a single sheet of white paper and handed it to Trent. "We have written a very nice resignation letter to Hamilton Holding Group, which just needs your signature, if everything looks correct." When finished reading the professional letter and taking the pen that had been extended to him, he said out loud, but more to himself, "I couldn't have expressed myself any clearer." And we'll end episode 2 there today. I hope you enjoyed hearing more of the Stevens family adventure, and I hope you'll join me next time for episode 3. As always, thanks for listening, and have a great day.